All right, thank you so much. So good afternoon to everyone. Thanks for being here. A short disclaimer, I am not a rocket scientist or engineer by any stretch, and whatever I know is very much self-taught. But I hope to share some of the considerations in developing a launch vehicle and some of the very interesting facts about the Saturn V. That's why we are here today. That's what we are celebrating. All right, so without further delay, why Moon? Why in 1960s, US decided to commit, in today's money, over $150 billion to getting a man to the moon? So let's put things in a perspective. Let's really set this entire tone of what space race was like. So first of all, that was the first time in history it became at least theoretically possible to actually get to the moon. And the picture you see is not random. It's the V-2 missile built in the Nazi Germany by the team of Werner von Braun, one of the key pioneers in history of rocketry. So what was special about this rocket is that it was propelled by liquid propulsion, liquid oxidizer or liquid fuel, which allowed for precise shutdown time, just when you reach the right speed. And it also included guidance system. It was flying in a precise direction towards a precise target. Keep in mind this picture, look at the paintwork, and I'll later give you some really interesting facts about the Saturn V. Also, Soviets were taking lead at that point. In fact, Americans were never that far behind in the 50s. The Vanguard satellite was ready in a couple of months after the Sputnik 1. And most people don't really realize, but Americans were kind of relieved when Sputnik 1 went up, because they already had the same technology on the works, but they were kind of scared that Soviets would protest if they were the first ones to fly an artificial object a couple hundred kilometers above their territory. That was a very political, very strategic thing for them, especially in the dawn of nuclear age. If you could send a satellite into orbit, you could possibly send a warhead into your enemy's territory and reach within 40 minutes or so. So it was a very politically charged situation. And on top of that, it was a very ideological clash. Communism versus capitalism. Borderline dictatorship, in fact, or autocracy versus Western democracy. Each one of them wanted to present themselves as more successful, more promising in terms of developing of every individual. So that was a very interesting challenge, and this entire competition was what set ground for the entire space race. And the gentleman on the picture is Yuri Gagarin, the first man to orbit the Earth on the Vostok 1 spacecraft in 1961. 61, just 8 years before the first lunar landing of Apollo 11. That's how quickly everything happened back then. So last but not least, if you think about it, Moon is actually not that far. And this is an up-to-scale image. So after you put your first satellite into orbit, after you send your first man into space, your first woman as well, what's the next logical step to take? What's the next milestone which is actually accessible, or somewhat accessible? So Moon is still not that far out. It's around 380,000 kilometers, depending on which time of the month it is. To compare with that, Venus is 39 million kilometers away at the closest approach. So it's just a whole different ballgame. So Moon was the logical choice, but how do you get to the Moon? So here, I don't want to get too techy, but ultimately we're discussing rocket science. So bear with me for a while. So first of all, I would like to help you understand the concept of orbital movement. It's critical in understanding how spacecraft are developed, how rockets really work, and how do you design a space mission. So the best way to understand it is with the Newton's analogy called the very tall mountain. So picture yourself standing on a very high mountain beyond the atmosphere, so you don't have to worry about air resistance and the degrading effects of that. And if you just drop an object or a cannonball, the analogy was using cannonball famously, if you just drop it, it will fall down. But if you launch it sideways, something very, very interesting happens. It obviously falls farther away, and the faster you go, the farther away you travel horizontally. And at one point, you travel so fast, that's around 7.3 kilometers per second, that's how fast it is. that you go all the way around the planet and return to the same spot. You are not actually outside of gravity. You're very much within it, but you don't really feel it because you don't encounter any obstacles, which is what we feel as weight. So that's a very interesting thing to understand when you're talking about weightlessness. It's not zero gravity, it's weightlessness. That's the correct term. But if you keep increasing that velocity, something very interesting happens again. The orbit becomes elongated. You travel farther and farther and farther out. And if you're traveling at around 11.2 kilometers per second, you will go so far out, you will actually exit the sphere of influence, the measurable sphere of gravity of the Earth, and then you'll start traveling around the sun on your own orbit. You don't have to go that fast to get to the moon, but it's pretty close. So to put things in a perspective, the delta V, the velocity change that you have to produce to get to low Earth orbit, it's around 9.5 kilometers per second. So as you already saw, the velocity is around 7.3, but you have to account for the vertical component, for the legwork you have to do to get yourself out of the atmosphere, and also for the air resistance itself. So that's why it adds up, all things considered, to around 9.5 kilometers per second. Why is that relevant? I'll explain on the next slide. And now, if you want to get yourself from Earth to low lunar orbit, you have to get even faster. You have to generate a velocity change along the way at different phases of the flight of around 13.5 kilometers per second. And okay, this is old slide. There was a typo. For Mars, it's actually 15.5, roughly there. Apologies about the mistake. So yeah, it's even faster. So you have to generate that. And how do you generate that? How do you generate the 19 kilometers per second you have to generate to go to the moon and then back? Well, with a rocket. Essentially, a rocket is a self-contained delta V device. Why do I say self-contained? Because it does not require any substance from outside, like a turbofan engine of an airliner, for instance. It takes the oxidizer from the atmosphere, and therefore it would not work beyond certain altitudes. A rocket works at any altitude because it carries its fuel and oxidizer inside of the entire of the fuselage. And this is an equation which shows how much delta V can you produce from a particular rocket. It's actually very simple. You know, a simple spreadsheet can do the trick. And from this, what you have to know is that you want to minimize your dead weight and maximize your exhaust gas velocity, which means you need some substance which is light to generate that, quick exhaust gas from coming out of the nozzle, which is going to be relevant very soon. Also, there is a concept called multi-stage rocketry. It's not new. This thing has been around since the 1400s at least. And the idea is that if you have multi-stage rocket, you can not only reduce the dead weight that you carry along the way, you can also optimize the propulsion systems for particular applications at different phases of your mission. You can use heavier, more powerful engines for your early ascent to get yourself directly against the gravity. And after that, you can use something that's lighter, doesn't generate so much thrust maybe, but it's more efficient. So you can generate more delta V. And that is exactly what happened in the Saturn V rocket. So before we jump into the rocket itself, another thing which we have to consider is what mission architecture should we choose if we're going to the moon? There is a way to go directly. That means you only have one spacecraft. It goes all the way to the moon, lands itself, and then returns back. Naturally, that's going to require all of that architecture to be sent back and there and back, which is a lot of dead weight. So it's not the most efficient way. It was preferred throughout much of the early planning phase of the Apollo program because of its simplicity and because you don't have to rendezvous and dock with any other spacecraft along the way. But ultimately, it was just seen as wasteful, and I'll show you why in a second. So then another concept, which was previously considered, is called the Earth Orbit Rendezvous. That means you have a lander and you have a command module with a service module, and you launch them separately with two different rockets. You encounter in orbit around the Earth, and only then you continue all the way to the moon. That was actually considered for the Constellation program back in the early 2000s. That program was later shelved, unfortunately. And the last configuration, which was actually chosen for the Apollo program, is called the Lunar Orbit Rendezvous, which means you do use a single rocket to get yourself up, but not all of that spacecraft actually lands on the moon. They separate there is only one lander module which goes down, and after that, just an ascent stage of that lunar module goes up and rendezvous with the other spacecraft, and only then the astronauts and their cargo return back. So, let's compare how does it look like in practice. All right, so in the very center you see the Saturn V. You're probably very familiar with that shape. It's very iconic. On the right side, you can see the Saturn 1B, which was used only for missions into low Earth orbit. And if they wanted to choose the direct ascent configuration, which means the whole thing lands and goes back, they would have to develop what they called the Nova, which is even more ridiculously powerful. So when they did their mission analysis, they realized it was just not very practical to put something so huge. The support structure would be even more ridiculous than for the Saturn V. The structural stress on the vehicle would be even greater. And they decided to go with Saturn V instead. And the lunar lander, which was used for the actual Apollo program, is roughly the same as the smaller one on this slide, as compared to the one that would be used for the direct landing according to the early analysis. That's why, ultimately, the lunar orbit rendezvous was seen as a preferred choice. So, this is the theory. Now let's jump into practice. Let's see what was the launch vehicle that actually made it possible, that actually set course of history and landed men on the moon. That's the Saturn V. 111 meters high. It was approximately 3,000 tons in launch mass. 3,000 tons, let that sink in, how huge that thing is when fully fueled. On the left side, you can see the block of 5 F1 engines, Rocketdyne F1 engines. Each one of them was producing about 6.7 million meganewtons of thrust, each one of them at sea level. That still, to the day, the most powerful engines ever built. And all of that because of the same considerations which I mentioned about before, the delta V. You have to go against the gravity, you have to generate enough velocity, and you have to sustain it for a while. So, the gentleman on the picture is actually Wernher von Braun, the guy who built the V2 missiles. And he was, together with his team of around 700 people, they were all moved to the US at the end of the war. They were forgiven their involvement with the weapon development programs. And that's when they got to fulfill their dreams of actually building a rocket that would land people on the other planet, or the moon. So this is the development timeline in comparison with the earlier launchers. So you can see that actually the launchers used for the previous Gemini mission, the Titan, were based on an ICBM, on an intercontinental ballistic missile. In fact, this is pretty grim. It's a pretty morbid thing to say, unfortunately, but the development of spacecraft and launch vehicles have always been very closely related to development of weapon delivery systems, which is a very somber thing to know about nature of humankind, unfortunately. And only at the point when the Saturn program, which was subsequent to the Jupiter program, and that's where the name came from. Saturn is the next planet after Jupiter. So Jupiter missiles were medium-range ballistic missiles based on very similar technology, and they were used largely to prove some of the key concepts and key fundamental technologies before the development of the Saturn program. So Saturn was eventually rolled out in two different versions. The smaller one, which only required a delta V to enter low orbit, and that was used for many of early test flights, and the Saturn V, which was powerful and large enough to go all the way to the moon and back. So this is where things get really interesting. So you can see Saturn V itself was actually made up of 3 different stages. So the first stage was propelled by 5 Rocketdyne F1 engines. As I mentioned before, 6.7 meganewtons of thrust each. And they were propelled by RP1, which is a very, very well-refined form of kerosene. Same kerosene as in, let's say jet engines. It's a very similar thing, but it's even more refined to prevent clogging of all those different plumbing elements. And liquid oxygen. So liquid oxygen is a very interesting oxidizer. It's cryogenic, which means it's very, very, very cold. It's In the liquid form, it's at around minus 183 degrees Celsius. That's how cold it is. And I will show you another very fun way to use it in a moment on another picture. So the second stage was, it was not so important for it to be so powerful anymore. It could use less, it didn't have to be so heavy, it didn't have to have such powerful engines, but it had to be more efficient. So for that, and for the third stage, the contractors and the key design team decided to use liquid hydrogen, which is even more difficult to handle. It's even colder than liquid oxygen, but it's lighter. The molecular mass is lighter, therefore the exhaust gas could be faster. And with more exhaust velocity, you can produce more delta V with the same kind of systems. So liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen were subsequently still used in the space shuttle program, based largely on the technology developed for the Saturn V. Then we have the third stage. It used one J2 engine, same as the second stage, but it had a key modification. That engine was actually restartable. You can see that there are, on some pictures, you will see that there are those fancy-looking circular tanks around the engine. That's actually the nitrogen to pressurize the entire system, pressurize the fuel tank, again for another firing, because it was pressure-fed. The first stage was using a turbo pump instead. So, okay, not to digress too much, but rocket engines operate at very, very high pressures. We're talking, in a typical one, you could look at 100 bar, or close to 100 atmospheres. So to continue supplying oxidizer and fuel into it for combustion, you need to supply them at an even greater pressure. Otherwise, it will not go in a stable manner into the combustion chamber. So the way to do it is by using a turbo pump. Those things are madly complex, but they are very mass effective in some situations. If you're talking about a very, very large rocket, you don't want to pressurize the entire fuel tank, because that would mean that it has to become very, very, very heavy. It has to become structurally very strong. So the other way is to use a pressurizing gas. And the upper stage, the stage 3 of Saturn V, was actually using a pressurized tank to stabilize the entire propellant before ignition and also keep supplying it during the burn. On top of it was the Apollo spacecraft, made up of 4 different elements, actually. So, okay, here we have. Okay, so this is the descent module of the lunar lander. So that's the thing that did all the legwork during the descent. On top of it, you can see a separate module, actually. This is the ascent stage. So it detached itself during the return to rendezvous with the service module over here, and it didn't have to carry all of that unnecessary stuff back into orbit, lunar orbit in this case. This is the command module. This is the only thing of the Saturn V that actually returned back to Earth. Yeah, that's the tyranny of the rocket equation for you, unfortunately. It's quite crazy. And on this thing on the very end is the service module. So it contained most of the life support systems, the power generation, and of course the engine, which was used for all large maneuvers during the journey. All right, so if you want to imagine what it looked like, so the Saturn V was only used in the very early phase of the mission. Just the first, most of it was only used for around 12 to 13 minutes. After that, the third stage was reactivated once to get the spacecraft into so-called translunar injection. That's where the velocity was built up until the highest point of the orbit, the so-called apoapse or apogee, intersected with the orbit of the moon all the way. This is not to scale, by the way. This is way too small. So this is a very interesting situation. If you have seen the movie Apollo 13, you will know that the spacecraft had to dock to extract the lunar lander at one point during the mission. Why is that so? So let's take a few steps back. So the lunar module is actually right over here on top. But the Apollo service module and the command module were on top of it. The reason for that, the reason why there was a necessity to detach all of that system and extract the lunar module first, was because of the launch escape system, the LES. There is this spire on top of the entire rocket. And that spire is designed to carry the service module, sorry, not service, the command module with the crew to safety if something goes wrong. It detaches the entire thing. It's got some solid rocket motors in it, so it can rapidly accelerate and get away if something goes wrong. And the engineers looked into ways how to connect the lunar module and the command module before launch, but there was no way to do it without sacrificing this possibility to evacuate the crew in times of crisis during the launch. So, okay, this is a close-up of the F1 engine that was used on the first stage. And what I want to show you is this very, very interesting technique to use this very cold liquid oxygen to ensure stable burn of that engine. So you can see all that pipes everywhere. This is actually a heat exchanger. So that cryogenic substance, the liquid oxygen, was actually fed through all those pipes to regeneratively cool the engine during the burn time. Otherwise, it would have melted. The temperatures were just too brutal, even for advanced materials, to survive it without any detrimental effects within seconds or minutes. Over here, you see what's called a gas generator, right here. So this is a part of the engine which took a bit of oxidizer and a bit of fuel and burned them at a lower temperature, at a basically lower efficiency, just to propel the turbopump, which in turn generated enough pressure and enough energy to supply the fuel and oxidizer at the correct rate and correct pressure into the main combustion chamber. So this system is actually used in majority of contemporary rockets as well, including Falcon 9. It also uses a gas generator, so-called cycle of supplying those substances into the engine. And as you can see, this hot gas, which is not as hot as the one from the main combustion chamber, which is in the center over here, it was actually supplied into the nozzle in a bit to, recover some of that energy. So feed it into the main, into the nozzle, so it flies out together with the main exhaust gas. So it did lose maybe 2 or 3% of the entire efficiency compared to a closed cycle engine, but it was much simpler compared to the other configuration that was considered. Another interesting thing that you should notice is all those hydraulic mounts over here. So this is a hydraulic system to actually swivel the engine and allow it to be pointed in the right direction. This is important because you need to control your trajectory. So thrust vectoring is essential for that. So yeah, that was a very, very complex machinery. It had to be very precise and operate under very, very difficult conditions. Okay, so on this picture you can see a slow motion camera footage from the launch. I believe that's Apollo 4, which is one of the test flights. And actually this gas over here, the black-looking gas, is the colder one coming from the gas generator. Only if you waited for another couple of seconds over here, you would see all that massive yellow flame just popping up from that thing. So during the first mission, during the Apollo 4, which was the first mission to fly the Saturn V, the blast wave was so powerful that it actually damaged a media building 3 miles away. That's how strong it was. That's the sound pressure level which was generated during that launch. So subsequently, what NASA decided to build is the water suppression system, which was later also used by the space shuttle. And it did reduce the sound pressure level by several decibels, and that's one of the reasons the launch facility was put so close to a water body. Otherwise, you would have troubles pumping such a huge amount of water just to suppress all that shockwave during the launch. All right. And as a result, after all those hundreds of different technical problems, after pushing the limits of material science and of rocketry and of computing, Apollo 11 made it as the first mission to the moon on July 20th, 1969, exactly 50 years ago. But it was not the only one. In fact, the Saturn V was flown several times. The first one was the Apollo 4 mission, which was unmanned. Apollo 9 was actually the first one to leave the Earth's orbit and get humans to orbit the moon. They did not carry their lunar module with them at that point, but it was the first time humans observed the Earthrise. as the Earth emerged from behind the moon. One of the most iconic images of 20th century, and it was actually captured by Apollo 8. Apollo 9 tested the lunar module in low Earth orbit. Apollo 10 brought it all the way to the lunar orbit, but it did not land. And Apollo 11 was the first one that was scheduled for an actual touchdown. Apollo 13 did not make it to the moon. It had to abort its mission because of an explosion in an oxygen tank. And there is a fantastic movie I keep telling everyone, watch Apollo 13. It's by Ron Howard. It's the best film ever made to me. Seriously, check it out. And in 1972, the Apollo 17 mission was the last one to actually go to the moon. Since Apollo 15, the lunar module was changed. It was designed to sustain up to 3 days of human presence on the moon per mission. That's how long they would actually stay on the surface. And Apollo 15 and forgot if there were any more of them, but they actually carried the famous lunar rover, which was very interesting as well. It extended the range of exploration beyond the immediate few hundred meters from the lunar module itself. So the last mission of Saturn V and the end of an era was in 1973, and that was the Skylab launch. Skylab was an orbital station, and Saturn V launched it at one go. It could carry 120 tons of payload to low Earth orbit, so it was strong enough to actually do it by itself. The ISS took multiple missions from both US and Russia before it was assembled in orbit. The Skylab was launched one shot. That's how strong Saturn V was, and that really should make you appreciate just the raw power of that thing. So what happened later on? Saturn V was very interestingly considered for a manned flyby of Venus. But the mission was canceled together with Apollo 19, 20, and 21, unfortunately. So some of the Apollos some of the Saturn V's are still accessible for viewing in Florida and in Houston. But unfortunately, because the technology in life support systems was simply not good enough, there was no need for and no means for a sustained lunar base. That's why the program was basically canceled. The focus of the space race moved towards low Earth orbit and towards orbital stations, and as a result, the technology did improve drastically, but it was not as high profile. So I have to finish up. So even until now, Saturn V is still the most powerful rocket ever designed and built and flown. Now we are looking at SLS, which NASA is developing, and not the Starship by SpaceX. Those could be the first ones to actually take it over as the most powerful one ever built. And that's it. Thank you for your attention. Hopefully this was not as boring. Thank you.
Hi, nice to be here. Art Science Museum. So how to relate art and science, right? So, what you see over here is NTU. It's not another rocket launcher site, but it's one of the study hubs that look very beautiful, one of the most beautiful campus in the world. Okay, today I'm going to share with you 101 of satellite, anything about satellite, and you welcome you question come to us. So far we have launched 9 satellites. We design and build satellite in this small little island and this small little campus. So today's topic is what is that about? Anything about satellites. So before that, I'd like to bring some topics to share with you. So building a satellite, we need scientists, we need engineers. So what is that? I think there's some children here. What you like to be, a scientist? Or you like to be an engineer? What is that, right? Yeah. So it's very difficult to distinguish that. But basically, sometimes we can say that a scientist do what we don't know. An engineer do something that we know. Right? Okay. So we have some scientists here. The Mark is here, do physics. I'm basically an engineer, all right, to build things, I build products, we build satellites. So what's next? So there's a term come to here, science genius. So that's where the kids come to be, the science genius, right? Okay, so how are you going to build satellites, right? That's what I'm going to say about. Satellite is really a very challenging product that we all, not the usual product we always see with our TVs, computers, cars. Like, it really we need to understand the multidisciplines, automotive and other mechanical parts, the space environment, and so on and so forth. So there's really things that we need to think about how to do a satellite. So I was not a satellite engineer before, so I really need to tune my mind how to build a satellite. So as just mentioned, the world's first satellite was launched in 1957, and not far back then, and that's 50 years back, man started to land on the moon. It's pretty interesting, a 10-year gap there. And then 50 years right now, you see what's the developments going on. Really, there's a lot of change. And I believe the changes will be exponential in maybe 10 years or 20 years back. You'll see really a very drastic change. But this is the first satellite that launched by Russia. It looked round, it looked simple, but it actually proves a lot of things for us. So to understand the photo, we really need to know what satellite is. A satellite basically is an object that orbiting or flying, or words is going around the Earth. And what you see here, okay, a lot of building we stay or we go, it's about a few hundred meters. And sometimes you go in Cloud Mountain, you go trekking. Sometimes do track, and when you reach about 3,000 meters, you feel breathless, right? Thereafter, you could go, if you go to plane, you could go to about 10 or so kilometers. And if you go balloon, you go to 20 kilometers, you call it near space area. And if you take notice in your Facebook, and so we all talk about space station, there's astronaut up there talking to you, waving to you, and they are about 400 kilometers up there. And when we launch satellite, basically we launch about this area of time, 400 or 500 or even up to 800 kilometers. So I just want to let you have a feel about this, all right? So International Space Station, where the astronauts up there, is just about 400 kilometers away. So what is 400 kilometers? Singapore is 40 kilometers, right? So 400 is actually very near. So where's Simon? Okay, we need him to bring us there. Because 400 kilometers is very near. We just want to go. Yeah, working on it, right? So I just want to buy a ticket tomorrow and fly up there and look at the moon, then have a short break, a weekend there, stay, then I come back home again. It's just very near. So let's understand that's 400 kilometers away. That's where I want to go. Okay, I'm not going to the moon yet. And you didn't go to the moon, you pay more, right? So some of the jargon, that's why I relate some jargon to you to have a feel. Okay, that's where Earth is. So in some of these satellite guys, what we call LEO, GEO, and MEO, and this thing like that. So LEO is low Earth orbits, where we're talking about 500 and 800 kilometers. That's very near. Okay, then there's so-called MEO 2000, and there's high Earth orbits. I think something relate to something that you know. The GPS is about 20,000 kilometers away. So always use our phone. You have GPS. We know where is it. They are about 20,000 kilometers. Those information let you know where the location is while our Earth is going around and around, right? So this is about the height differences. So moon is something far, far away. So how high the satellite, or how fast the satellite fly, right? So the plane it always travels. It gives you about a few hundred kilometers per hour, and if you are really a jet fighter, you go to a few thousand kilometers per hour. But a satellite, when orbiting around the globe, is about 26,000 kilometers away. Right? That's just give a rough figure. It's very approximate figures. All right. So what does that really mean? Right? It's about talking about 1 second, 8 kilometers. So just then you reach 16 kilometers. So for those local, you fly over Singapore already, right? So just have a feel about how this fly is. So when we say about 1 second, 8 kilometers, so we don't know about the Earth is there. So the satellite fly around the Earth about 100 minutes, approximately, depending on the height and all this calculation, but if you have got few, it's 100 minutes. So generally, we're talking about 24 hours a day. So you fly over us about 14 times a day. Okay, or fly 14 times around the globe. So depending on how the orbit is being controlled. All right? So in some case, because we fly our own satellite in NTU, we fly our satellite in what we call equator orbits. That's why it's going by equator. So it fly over us, over Singapore, 14 times a day. So we always need to say hi to them 14 times a day. Okay, that's a rough view of that. So it's really that fast, 1 second, 8 kilometers. How are we going to control them? Of course, not compared to just now. The rockets is really much, much faster, right? So get another thing let you think about it, okay? So we just bring everything to a second mode. So you know the F-15 and all this plane, actually it will fly about less than a kilometer per second. So 1 second is less than 1 kilometer, right? But a satellite actually in 1 second go 8 kilometers away. So speed of light, you know, is very fast, 3 times 10 to the power. And so it's 1 second, 300,000 kilometers, or 30,000 kilometers, 300,000 kilometers. And speed of sound is about 300 kilometers, 0.3 kilometers per second. Okay, so I just want to give this relative figure to you. Is something is very interesting here. So the Earth is orbiting, right? So sometimes by use of some basic mathematical calculations, right? The Earth go one round in 24 hours. So we are now in equator. So if we know the radius or diameter, we know what is the speed that we are traveling, right? Because we are traveling. I don't know whether anyone calculated that before, okay? So a simple mathematical calculation, so it can tell you the rotation speed of Earth at equator is about 0.4, about 400 kilometers, 400 meters per second. So actually we are traveling right now as very, very fast as compared to sound. So, right, not about speed, but sound. So when I talk, it's about 300 meters, but we are actually moving at 400 meters per second. So sometimes I'm really cracking my head. So when doing the satellite fly up there, it's actually moving per second at 8 kilometers. So the relative speed and reference point is really going haywire when we do design of satellites. Unlike when we are here, you say you run how fast and so. The relativeness is quite different, right? Very, very, very interesting part of that. And the other thing that I always dream about, I'm not quite sure what will happen, because now we are in equator, so it's orbiting in this speed. So what will happen if I stand at here, the top, the tip of this ball rolling, right? So if I stand there, am I turning on the spot? Okay, I don't know. I hope one day I'll be there and see what the effect is, all right? Okay. Okay, back to the satellites. So just now, Simon have talked about launcher rockets. So the rockets, we need the rocket to push the satellite up there into the orbit. Then on that, release the satellites, and the satellites start to orbit around the globe, or maybe go into the moon or so. But you need to talk to the satellite. So basically, in the ground stations, to talk to the satellites. Otherwise, you're lost control, right? So these are basically, in the engineering point, there's 3 segments we are talking about. So what is really a satellite? Satellite is an object. So if you look into a satellite, basically a satellite have to be just like our handphone. So they must have a computer, right? That's simple. They're able to make decisions, say, where am I, and this and that. And they might have some sensor to know where they are. Maybe in simple form for us to say, oh, GPS, so they know where they are, right? So another sensor is that they have a sensor called magnetic field. Because at every part of the Earth, the magnetic field is different. So the satellite actually make use of magnetic field to know where they are. Sounds crazy, right? This is something very, very difficult to appreciate, right? And then, of course, there are power. So the satellite have a battery there to have power, but they need to charge. So they have always you can see the satellite have a big solar panel to charge from the sun, right? And in usual, we don't allow this battery to go down really low. I think most of us use our handphone even when it's left 2% charge, you are still WhatsApping and drain every different source, right? So in the satellite guy, when the thing only drain even 20%, we'll just wing and keep looking and staring at that thing. So we don't even allow it to go to 20% because the battery once died, it will die, right? Okay, so this is about a satellite basically. Okay, and you have a communication to talk to the ground. So, but important, these are general. So another thing that what the satellite do, a satellite may take photo. So what I call that the payload. So the payload is the one that take photos, maybe measurement some sun array or talking or communication to the ground or things like that. So that are special tasks that satellite will do. Okay, so generally we're taught there's a satellite and what's the payload or what it's being doing. So for example, this one is the first Singapore designed microsatellite. All right. Well, I'm saying design because anyone can buy, any government, any university can buy a satellite. But this is one that's first designed in Singapore, in NTU. I think we need to have a lot of guts of this, our earliest and every precedents that we have. They've invested a lot in such things. So we have launched the first Singapore design satellite in 2011 in India. So just now I mentioned about payload. So basically, this is one of the payload is a camera able to take photo. All right, after I show you a photo. And we have this one of the what we call the enduring models or the weight models right besides there. You can take a look of that. Okay, that is the actual size and actual weight satellites. So just to take a little bit look into there, so there's a lot of different things right inside there that we need to package it, wire it, screw it to inside to it, make sure that the satellite is able to determine where the position is, how to control and this. So this is another part of the satellite view where this special thing, a big thing here is actually the camera. So that's where the payload actually is. So this is an NTU, one of the clean room that we have. So whenever you do a satellite, other than individual module they are testing, you have to place them in a 2D dimension, what we call flat sets. So over there, then we're able to keep doing all the debugging work, finding the faults and building it up. And finally, once it's done, we make it in a flight model, a 3D model. So this is an actual satellite, and we build all this right in this model, the islands, right, within the university. Okay, thereafter, what is this satellite going to do? Yes, that's where the launcher come about. So you can see that the satellite is about a small fridge size, all right? Then you have to tie or connect to something, right? So you have to mount onto this deployer, and the other satellite will be put it on the same structure, all right? So this whole thing look like a satellite too. And this big thing will be put on top of here. And just now Simon has mentioned about the different stages. So depend on the satellite, how big the thing is. If they're going to go to moon, you're going to go to Mars, then they have a different type of fuel system. They have double booster and all this thing coming about. So these are all the different parts. And if you look at all the SpaceX, we're going to return, right? So there'll be a different structure again. So ultimately, everything will be here. So as mentioned earlier, if you change this one to be a warhead, then it becomes a missile, right? So right here, where we put it over here, right? So ultimately, when everything is dropped off, your final parts of this will be orbiting around the Earth. And this model satellite will be one by one deployed from there, and they start their own missions. So this is what XSAT is, launched in India in 2011. And thereafter, we do the experiment. So this is one of the first images that were taken by our own Singaporean design satellite. So you can see this satellite is, image taken 11 May. And equator, you do see a lot of cloud. So you can see, you can estimate what the time is. The cloud, what's that called, the shadow. So generally, it's taken about 12 p.m., in the afternoon. Okay, then you see all the red spots, basically because this camera, you have a lens, what we call a near-infrared lens, where you look at, and all the glass and all the forest give us a red color. This is taken 2011, and you compare right now 2019, you can see a lot of differences right now. Okay, so this is about microsatellites. So what's next right now? If you notice, in the news, Facebook, whichever, there's a lot of words called new space. There's a lot of new satellite companies, startup company going on right now for the past 5 years. It's really a crazy time, I would say. So what's next is pretty interesting because I think it's going to change our life a lot. Because I think last time, when the internet comes, really changed a lot. We get a lot of information. When a mobile phone comes to us, it also changed a lot of our lifestyle because information is much easier. But this all is through internet or network. But if there's another means of satellite flying and give you us another alternate view or another view of information, it's really going to change us a lot. And if all this, with all the launcher, you're able to bring us to space, then our life really change. Okay, so what the new space is? Basically, it started much early in 1999 in Cal Poly and Stanford. Define a small little size, what I call 1 unit size, 10 cm by 10 cm. You can see one of the model right over there. So it's a 1U size, then 2U size, 3U size, and 6U size. So by defining that so that they're able to slot into a container called deployer, right? Then we're able to deploy it from the container. So in a satellite or a launcher point of view, you'll be much safer because all these experiments can be put inside a container instead of a big satellite. So these are some of the definitions. So in NTU, you can see us that we do the design. We do the design, the satellite, the schematic, the IC design, or we build it, and we have a chamber. We do all the vacuum tests, and we do all the different tests. And we have a ground station, a very beautiful, very ground station. But it's not just beautiful, but it's automatically operational. So right now, there will be, and most of the time there's nobody right there because it's a no-man operation satellite. So all the script and mission will be running there, and everything will be automated. But I will always receive emails every pass of satellite, but I never really look at them. Any problem, someone will definitely call me. All right. Okay, when all designing all this satellite, what's there? A lot of worries is there into a technical point, but I'm just not going too much into that. Basically, because up there is basically about a lot of radiations, a lot of protons and things like that. You will disturb the electronics we have. So unless there's a space-grade parts, if not, then what is happening? So there's a lot of things to consider because when your rocket launch up there, you need to have light if possible. If it's too heavy, you need to pay a lot of fuels and pay a lot of money. And up there is so, although it's 400 kilometers away, so we need to calculate what's the link budget communications because when the rain and clouds come about, the communication signal will be low. And we can't just emit a very strong signal up there because we are human beings staying right on Earth. If any strong signals emit to the ground, you'll be affecting our health, right? So not to worry, there's a lot of regulation going on. So all the emission up there until here is really very small, very, very small. Okay? What I see here is some of the test facility that we have. We need to test the sun because one of the satellite up there, the easiest thing is to look at sun. Because everything is all black and the sun gives you the most energy. That's one of the easiest things to track. All right? So we need to do a lot. Just I mentioned about a magnetic field. So the magnetic field up in the space, every part will be different. So we need to do some calibration magnetic field. We need to cause the satellite to run, the turn, so there's a reaction wheels and attitude control going on, and so on and so forth. So vacuum change, we need to look at stars, because another form of looking at sun is quite straightforward, but sun don't give you the precision level, but star really is. Star is always there and not moving. And you look at stars, because Earth is moving and you're moving, so we always take reference for star, right? So that's another interesting part. Okay, talking so much about this, I think it's easier to see the visual, right? So let's look at some videos of how we do a satellite. So doing a small satellite doesn't mean it's easy because it's so small. So I'd rather say make it bigger is much more easier for hands. Kind of fun, right? Lego. Just stack it up. It works. You can see a battery pack here and different power control, communication control, computers. Lego. So there's another two antenna on top to talk to the geo satellite. So it's called example of a 3D model. So we have to do the testing. This is a solar panel detection test. have to test in a vacuum chamber because vacuum behavior will be different. So imagine the satellite will have to go through the rockets. So the rocket vibration is very hot. Boom. So you have to test X, Y, Z in different vibration frequency. Shake. At different frequency, actually you can notice the frequency vibration will be different. So to make sure that after that the electronics and mechanical still work. So always we need to get the information from the launcher, what kind of impact, what kind of force and vibration is that, and we do all the tests. So this is in our clean room. And after all this tests, we're shipped to the launch site. This is India. It's somewhere in the evening, a very nice sky. You see it launch up there. So there's a lot of place in the earth that we can go and see this thing. Along the internet information is there. You just go near there, you will see all of. So just now I mentioned about the different stage. So it happened that it's a clear blue sky here. You're able to see the last stage. The third stage was actually being deployed. So we are detached. So it's still visually able to see it.
Yeah.
So after the satellite was launched in India, we have to rush back. No, we can't rush back so bad. So in NTU, but India, Chennai is just come, it's just very near. Just a few seconds will reach us. So we are there to wait for our ground stations. Okay, this is the UHF, VHF signal that we receive. So, I don't know who is screaming. So you come out for that first that week of, it's really very exciting within the university because we didn't know whether it worked or not. Okay, you just have to pray. You see that, it's just a relief, right? But the first relief is always for the maybe the more mechanical guy because once that, but there's still a lot of electronic thing to be tested on. So this is the case, but I just now mentioned the mission room, most of the time there's nobody there, the light is off, it's operate. But during the first few weeks or first few months, a lot of people will be there, don't know what they're talking about, keep very worried, everyone worrying at different things, and it's quite stressful actually for us. Some people say, hey, this is not working. Don't make that, I always say, don't make that statement right now, okay? Okay. So, first few weeks is really quite stressful for us because you can't really explain a lot of things, all up there. Okay, I want to show you another few slides video. So this is where I was lucky to be there. This is in Japan. So a lot of our satellite launched in India or Japan. So this is one of in the islands. It's really pretty spectacular, I would say.
All systems are ready. Manage ignition. SRPA ignition and
working on it and you are right there, I think your heartbeats will go with what the sounds tell you. All right? Okay, another one. This is at night. So another one is bright in the morning. No. Okay, this is another one. I have a launch. Okay, you know why like that? Because I don't know why Facebook never tell me. This is the first time I do Facebook live feed there. All right, then it didn't tell me it cannot do that. So, but I just. Right. No, you will turn. I'll turn. Of course, the face will tell. Right. Okay. So the launch is over there. But I just want to hear the sound system is there, right? I'm using the latest handphone from Huawei, all right? So it's all right. So it's not my phone is not working, all right? Why there's no sound? Okay, I want to stop that for a while first. It's not because there are no sound. I think they worried, right? It's not about no sound. It's not my phone is not working. Or it's not my phone is not working or they are not working. Yes, there's no sound. And then many people can tell me why. Yes, it's engineer. What?
It's because that the sound takes longer to travel to your ears than the light from the rocket traveling to your eyes.
Yeah, and then prepare any gift already. Right? But anyway, it's fun, right? Okay, we see the video one more time, right? Then I count with you. Then if you're able to tell me how far are we, it will be great. Okay, start. Okay, let's imagine there's no sound yet. Okay, let's say the 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, about 7,000. I let the video play first, right? Yeah, so we hear that this 7 seconds away. So basically, just now I mentioned about 300 meters per second sound travel. So 703 is about 2 kilometers away, right? Okay, last 2 slides. Okay, this happens to be the 20th anniversary in NTU. This is the first Malayan payload. This look very retro, right? You know, all this guy with all the computers. So this is the first communication payload that we launched in 1999, 20 years ago. And thereafter, with this successful story, we built the XSAT, the first microsatellite. So initially, we just do a payload with UK, Surrey. Thereafter, we start to build different satellites. And these are my last slides. So far, we have built different 9 satellites. Some of the satellite model is just right there, all right? And we're operating all these satellites. See? I don't know how to off it. Okay. Okay, exactly. See, that's what an engineer do things, exactly times. Okay, so this is all the satellite right there. And young guy, Chan Chap here, you want to join to be the next science genius and bring satellite come to NTU. Any question or anything? Oh. Okay, I think basically I put a very general figure. Okay, I think less than 10 million or even smaller figure is possible. Some people promise you much even lower value. So basically right now it's much, much cheaper. It's just that what the satellite can do. If you just want a square size, there's maybe 2-3 million, it's possible to do that. It's just how you channel and how to do that. And you can call it like your names. If you'd like to build one and be named under your name, please come to us. I'll build one for you. Anyone interesting? Maybe the rocket scientist or they can answer. Yeah. So that's one worrying part. So whenever in Singapore we cannot do a rocket launch in this island because anything happen, you are dropped to our neighboring countries. Yes. Okay. the lifetime of a satellite depends on what's the design, okay? Most of the bigger satellites could be doing space-grade part. They can go 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years. For this microsatellite, we're using automotive parts. Generally speaking, when a university do that, sometimes most of the time we're talking about half year to 1 year. But technically speaking, by calculation of radiation effect and blah, 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 it's possible to do 3 years. So what, just 2015, we launched one of this 2015 December celebrating 50th anniversary of Singapore. We launched this satellite. Right now it's still working on a 3-year operations. We just pray it. Okay. After it died, it's become an object, or identified object, a UFO flying there, and there's no communications with them. So it become like a junk. So generally, there's another UN law that we're working. There is like any object, and we're able to calculate that within 20 years, able to deorbit into the atmosphere, it will burn to ashes. So as long as not so-called disturbs or other satellites. Yes.
Okay, we'll take one last question from this.
I have a question. Like NTU has ambition, to launch one satellite every 6 months, and that's what I read from the news. And till now, you have already launched 9 satellites, and its life is also 3 years. So what about debris, which will be going to be happen next 10 years? Have you thought about that?
Yeah. So I think debris case, there's a lot of new laws coming onto it. So again, just as I mentioned, all these satellites are less than 100 kilograms. Basically, based on their mass, they will deorbit within 20 years. So it's following the law. So all this will be burned off in the atmosphere. Yeah. So it's only the bigger satellites, like maybe tons, because after it's 3 or 4 tons, after it burned off, it's still left 1 ton, it will go re-entry into the Earth, to maybe drop into the sea. So there are different mitigation techniques right now. A lot of satellite workers are working on too. And that's what, because currently there's more like 10 to 20,000 of satellites planning to launch to Earth. And there's more laws and things will come in implement to make sure that they don't collide to each other, especially to the International Space Station. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here. We really like to thank Art Science Museum and SSTA for organizing and putting together this event. I think it's really a very humbling time to reflect on the 50 years since the lunar landing. Looking forward, I think there's so much more that we can achieve in the coming 50 years, and I think it's really a pleasure for me to speak over here. Riding on my colleagues, for example, Simon, who actually talked about propulsion systems which bring us up to space. Mr. Lim Wee Seng, who I'm very good friends with, we work very closely with Satellite Research Center as well, who actually built, designed, and organized missions for us to operate platforms in space. Now, I feel my position over here today, I see a lot of young minds over here ready to take up the mantle and bring us to the next 50 years of achievements in space. What I would like to say, right, is that apart from just going to the moon, the next generation has to look at bringing us further. We have landed people on the moon, we have started deep space exploration, but we need to look further, right? And I believe that the problems and challenges for space flight that we have talked about previously, and I think that there were some very interesting questions brought up by the public earlier on about mitigation of space debris, going further, sustaining flight and platforms in space. All these could be addressed by propulsion systems in space. So when I talk about propulsion today, it's not going to be the propulsion systems that Simon is talking about. These propulsion systems, his propulsion systems, are very vital to bring us up. My propulsion systems that I will be talking about today will be very small systems, but very propellant efficient. So how propellant efficient are we talking about? If we have a cup of water over here, imagine we just fill it a third with water. We'll be able to extend the physical lifetime of satellites by a factor of 5 to 9. So earlier on, Mr. Lim Wee Seng was talking about having these satellites having orbital lifespan of about 5 years. With just 100 grams of fuel, we can extend and enhance the lifetime by about a factor of 5 to 9 accordingly. And so this is something that I'm passionate about. And I'm also very passionate about, interacting with young minds and, crafting out how we can move these together for the next 50 years and maybe for the next 500 years. So let me just give a very quick introduction to myself. I understand that this is the Art Science Museum. I will try to refrain from using a lot of technical terms. Of course, for the academics out there, please forgive me for, for using terms that may not be very accurate, but I just want to, at the end of this talk, present the beauty in physics and how we can actually sustain space flight using novel and innovative solutions. My background, I actually spent 12 years in the civil service. I started out as a teacher. When I was teaching, I actually got an opportunity to do a PhD in physics. So I am a plasma physicist by training. So earlier on, Simon was talking about, this is something odd about humankind. Every time that something is interesting or sexy to us, we often use it to destroy ourselves. So as a plasma physicist, right, I get a lot of comments if you follow me on Facebook. I like to share popular science articles, and these guys will actually come up to me and ask me, hey Mark, can you build me a lightsaber? Can you build me a proton cannon? Can you build me a nuclear weapon? Yes, we potentially could, right? But there's much more to it than just destroying ourselves. I think that we should really be using technology to better ourselves, for the betterment of humankind. And therefore, later on when I speak, right, I'll be talking about how we can use these technologies to improve our lives and for us to better understand the physical world around us. So in this entire slide, as a plasma physicist, I think the most important thing that I need to convey over here is, at the end of the day, when you leave this room, as long as you have a basic understanding of what plasma is, I think I did my job already. Okay, moving forward, okay, we are commemorating the 50 years of Apollo lunar landing, right? I'm going to tell you how we can actually exploit plasma in everyday life, not just for space flight. Okay, we can use it for medicine, we can use it for power generation, but I will skew it towards the end to talk about how plasma technologies could be the future of spaceflight. Of course, coming from Singapore, we're going to talk about how our development in R&D has actually led to the commercialization of a product that will be deployed on a full platform that will be flown in space next year. So this is something that we're very excited about, because this is going to be the first of many missions up in space. We'll go up to low Earth orbit next year, and who knows where we might put our platforms in future. So we want to be the technological enablers that bring our platforms to space, to stars, and beyond, right? So first and foremost, let's just cut to the chase. What is plasma? Plasma is affectionately known, or rather, as plasma physicists, we like to tell people that plasma is the fourth state of matter. Okay? And if you do a little bit of physics, right, you'll tell me that there's more than 4 states of matter. There's a 5th state of matter called Bose-Einstein condensate. But let's not go there today, okay? Let's talk about 4 states of matter, okay? From primary school physics, or maybe you learned this in science, right? Primary school, no physics. Primary school science, right? You learn that there's 3 phases of matter: solid, liquid, and gas. Okay? In solid state, how do you move to the liquid state? Essentially, solids, right, their atoms are very closely packed together. How do you transit from solid to liquid? You think of it, if you have ice over here, it's solid state, right? You want to transit from solid to liquid. You just add in a little bit of energy, the ice starts to melt, you get water. Now, what happens if in this cup of water, it's liquid, right? You add in a little bit of energy. You put it, I mean, this is a plastic cup, a very bad example. You put it under the flames, of course, it will burn, right? Now, imagine this is a glass cup. We can all use our imaginations now. We are very arty, right? Okay. You leave it under a Bunsen burner. What happens after some time? The water starts to gain a little bit of energy, and it starts to vaporize. And when it vaporizes, it goes into another state of matter that we call gas. So if you are following my train of thought over here, solid, you give it a little bit of energy, you go to liquid state. Liquid, you give it a bit of energy, it becomes gas. Now, see what happens, it becomes plasma. Technical difficulty, but never mind. You all can, it's back on. Okay, so in a gaseous state, right, all we need to do to transit to the next phase is essentially just give it a little bit of energy to a collective gas. How much energy? Just enough energy for us to strip the electrons from the atoms. Now, what happens is a very beautiful thing. What happens is when the electrons are removed from the atoms, you get a collection, we call it a soup, of charged particles. Ions, electrons, neutrals, and charged particles, essentially. And why this is so beautiful, right, is we call this order in disorder. In a gas state, right, we always feel that things are very disorderly, they are subject to random motion. Now, plasma is very beautiful. And why is it so beautiful, right? It's because charged particles, through elementary physics, we understand that charged particles respond to electric and magnetic fields. The beautiful thing is, if we are able to use these electric and magnetic fields correctly, we can tailor how we want these charged particles to move. And in so, we can have very, very, very novel applications. For example, we can use this for nuclear fusion. Nuclear fusion, not for weapons, really for energy generation for the future. I'll talk about this later on. It's something that really sparked my drive to really want to pursue plasma physics. The other things that we can do is essentially to use this for rocket propulsion, space propulsion in space. Now, how do we do this? If we have this plasma and we can exhaust at extremely high speeds, what kind of speeds are we talking about? We'll go into that later. It's very, very interesting. We can make very, very functional propulsion systems at smaller footprints. How small? Something like this, just slightly larger than a dollar coin. You can take a look at the real physical size of it in the exhibition next door. Okay, so I'll talk about the applications of plasma very, very soon. But let me just address a few remarks, okay, about plasmas at this moment. Okay, so some of you are very, very amused, and this is really the reason why I need to give this talk over here. Because if not, people will keep asking me to build proton cannons for them, arc reactors, so that they can become Iron Man or lightsabers. Huh? So, yes, it's correct. Tony Stark, right? If you watch Iron Man, the first Iron Man, amazing story. He mastered plasma physics overnight. Okay, I took many years to complete my PhD in plasma physics, and I still don't think I can build an arc reactor. Okay, so yeah, Iron Man's arc reactor over there, which actually sustains his entire suit, is plasma-based. His plasma cannons? Yeah, they're all plasma, right? And finally, lightsabers. As mentioned before, we have to go beyond just destroying ourselves. We need to talk about how we can use these technologies for the betterment of society. So how can we actually exploit plasmas in real life? Let's just bring the link between science fiction and what we can do in reality. Number one, if you take a look at the full-size arc reactor, so Tony Stark's only job, right, was to miniaturize it. Okay? It's not simple. We have a full-size thermonuclear experimental reactor. It's the world's largest scientific experiment. It's called ITER. Now, what will this enable? It will enable the next generation to have clean energy, okay, and energy on demand, and not only that, fuel security. So we will not be worried of running out of our world's natural resources in future, okay? What else have we used this for? You see the plasma cannons that Iron Man used, right? We can actually use them to propel spacecraft. But the caveat is this, okay? The caveat to these plasma cannons, right? You all think the ones that I developed, okay, you see the one at the bottom right? This is actually a plasma thruster that I developed. Okay, nice image that I captured in vacuum chamber. The caveat is everybody would think, wow, this plasma thruster might be, a little bit too forceful, but no. How much trust are we generating out of this? Sometimes when you walk, right, you can feel the breeze blowing against your face. You can imagine that the amount of trust that I get from that, right, is less. Okay? But the important thing is, right, this will enable spaceflight because when you are up in space, this trust matters. It really, really matters. Okay? So, very quickly, plasma presenting the solutions and challenges of tomorrow. Now, this is really the dream of all plasma physicists, nuclear fusion. So why is nuclear fusion important? If you just give me 30 seconds, okay, the fuel that you need for nuclear fusion is just water. And what kind of water? Seawater. To give an example, if you can take a look of this, just 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer worth of water. So it's 1 kilometer cube. That is equivalent. Imagine if you can have It's not even the size of, it's slightly larger than a few swimming pools put together. But if you can have that body of water, right, it is actually equivalent to the world's oil reserves at this moment. So yeah, just 1 kilometer cube worth of water, it's all the oil that we have. Imagine you can sell it, you make a lot of money, right? Now, to put things into perspective for Singapore, right, how much water do we need? Okay, so you can imagine in the form of a swimming pool, right? Some of us are rich enough to have swimming pools at home. I don't. No money. Entrepreneur, no money. But you go to swimming pools to swim and enjoy and work out. Just 0.72% of the swimming pool water, right? You can generate electricity for Singapore for the entire year. Less than 1% of the swimming pool water can generate energy for the entire year. So this is the beauty of plasma physics. And of course, we need the next generation of physicists to step up to the mantle and really develop these systems for us. Because as my professor always told me, like, when he was a PhD student, his professor told him, how long before we can achieve commercially viable fusion? 30 years. When I started doing my PhD, I asked similar professors, how long before we get to see it? It's 30 years. And hopefully, your generation will get to drive technologies that will enable your generation and the generations after to realize fusion. Okay? So this is a little bit of the main motivation of what I'm doing. What else can we do? We talk about clean energy. I used plasmas in my early days to make very, very nice materials. Okay? Last time in Singapore, very sexy, we talk about renewable energy, we talk about solar cells. So last time I used plasmas to make nice materials for solar cells. That was my PhD. A bit boring, but yeah, that's how I became acquainted to plasma physics. We use plasmas also for medicine, and you can see over here, this is a plasma pen that I developed. And I want to use this plasma pen for all-in-one solution for surgery. So imagine now, all surgery, right, is being conducted by surgeons, right? And they utilize different tools. You need a tool to sterilize the surface, you need a tool to cut the tissue, you need a tool to remove the tumor, and you need some more tools to actually sew it up. And everything, you realize, is dependent on the surgeon skills, right? If your surgeon sneeze, wow, finish, right? So the future of medicine, right, I really believe, right, is totally deterministic treatment of patients. And how we can do this is using a plasma pen. Because if we have something like this, to sterilize, to cut tissue, to remove tumors, and to promote wound healing. Now, all that we need to couple, right, is these guys who are very good in AI robotics. You have a robot surgeon with a plasma pen. That's all we need. Then all the doctors go out of jobs. Haha. Okay, next, I use this for environmental control and circular economy, education and research. This is very important. I'm going to zoom very quickly. And of course, we talk about space, and this really is the focus of what we are going to talk about today. Now, in space, we couple into a few other things. We don't just talk about this for propulsion, because I think a lot of you all will feel that I'm biased in talking about propulsion, since that's what I'm trying to commercialize, right? We use plasmas also for power generation on board spacecraft, and this is something that people are talking about at this moment, because the current spacecrafts, most of them are powered by solar panels. In fact, all of them are powered by solar panels. Now imagine when you go to deep space, right, where access to these light sources do not become that predictable, then we need to think about another solution for us to generate the electricity that we need to sustain our operations in space, and plasmas could be a solution. We also talk about remote healthcare. So I know that there's a small group working on, treating astronauts in space. How do we treat astronauts in space if we don't fly doctors up to space for certain surgical procedures? So as mentioned previously, we could use these plasma pens together with robotic tools to actually treat these ailments in future when we decide to colonize other planets. We do this for propulsion, and we also use this for additive manufacturing. So in the past, before the rocket takes off, right, you need to make sure everything is in place. But now you realize you fly already, then you realize you forgot to bring a screwdriver. How? You 3D print it. And plasmas could be a solution for that as well. You can get to print very, very resilient materials. So for example, in the International Space Station, when they continuously innovate, and they realize that maybe there's a product that could be a solution to some of the challenges on board. All they have to do on ground is just send up the G-code slicer profile then they print out the entire thing, then we can solve the problem already. So this, I feel, is really the future. Okay, so moving forward, I'm going to propulsion now. So from a company's perspective, I'm the founder. I actually run this company that develops low-power, compact plasma thrusters for the small satellite markets. And of course, these technologies are the proprietary to Singapore, even though these systems are Hall effect based. And we'll talk about the technology later on. So why should we be concerned about propulsion, right? I think a lot of people like money, right? Do you love money? Yeah, I know I do. But unfortunately, I don't have that much, so I love it. But okay. So anyway, if we look at this, right, we realize that the impetus for how we are driving space at this moment is back in the 70s, right, 60s, 70s, a lot of development in space was really driven by the governments, by large agencies, huge funded missions that wanted to bring people to the moon and beyond. And we realized that we kind of hit a snag in between towards 1980s, 90s, and so forth. There weren't really huge innovations. There were, I mean, want to talk about those intermediates, but we realize, right, that the real exponential growth, right, has been catalyzed by constellations. So if any one of you who is interested in space right now, you would have heard of SpaceX, right? SpaceX recently deployed 60 satellites, the first of the many going up for the Starlink constellation. Big story. Amazon, right? Amazon, who would have thought Amazon was going to space? They have talked about deploying a constellation of 3,000 plus satellites going up for Project Kuiper. And along with that, we have many other constellations going up. Bear in mind that all of these guys, right, SpaceX, Amazon, Boeing, these guys are commercial entities. So what's really driving the space industry right now, research and development, really is commercial entities funding large research and development efforts to build subsystems that can accomplish objectives that they want. For example, SpaceX wants to allow for low-cost internet and communications to worldwide, right? So they pour in money to develop payloads proprietary to their applications for communications, right? And for different entities, for example, people who want to do insurance, right? It's important to assess damage, to decide how much you want to pay out to certain people, right? And so they want to develop particular Earth observation payloads to perform these functions. So really, again, at the end of the day, commercial entities are driving the growth of the space industry. So additionally, why is this important to commercial entities right now? It's because, I saw the 10 minutes left. It's really because space is now much more accessible. Cost is not really very, very important due to miniature platforms. So really, we should bother about miniature platforms in space because I quote Mr. Lim Wee Seng in one of his previous talks, space will enable the ABCDs of a smart nation. So A, artificial intelligence, B, blockchain, C, cloud, D, data analytics, E, edge computing. These are all sexy terms that we like to throw around right now that, people from commercial entities, if they hear the word AI, right? Well, immediately they'll be excited, but they don't really know what AI is about, right? They hear, wow, blockchain, wow, cool. Cloud computing, yes, good, sign me up. But they have no idea what it is about. I would say that space will enable ABCDEs. Why? Because with the ability for us to fly our platforms, very accessible platforms to the public at lower altitudes, it means that we can achieve data with higher revisit rates. And this amount of data is of importance to the commercial entities, ABCDE. Okay, so very quickly, I'm going to talk about propulsion systems. What propulsion systems can do. Conventional propulsion systems, they are used for station keeping. Station keeping in, your satellites up in space, of course, you do understand from the previous talks that after a certain point of time, right, they'll burn out in the atmosphere, or they aren't able to maintain their orbits. Now, our propulsion system will enable our satellites to maintain their stations, we call this station maintenance, station keeping, and also to enhance the physical lifetime of our satellites in space. Number two, debris avoidance. some people asked really good questions earlier on. If the satellites were to remain in space, of course, there will be a collection of space junk. And of course, if there are irresponsible satellite manufacturers that put up 2 million satellites up in space, 2 million space junk down there, if you don't have a propulsion system, right, you're going to be problematic because every single second you pray that you don't be hit by one. Okay? We need propulsion systems to effect orbital change, and we see this in SpaceX's satellites. 60 of their satellites that they first sent up, right? Every single one of them has a Hall thruster deployed on board. And what these propulsion systems enable them to do, right, is essentially to, when they deploy them at 500 kilometers, get them to climb to the altitude that they want for their purposes. Of course, we also talk about attitude control. If we are deploying satellites up in space and you want them to point at particular places, very agile, at very short amounts of time, then a propulsion system makes sense. What's conventionally deployed on satellites at this moment will be reaction wheels. These reaction wheels have to spin, and of course, when they spin a little bit too fast, they cannot desaturate, there will be a problem. So we need propulsion systems to desaturate these wheels and for attitude control. This is a hot topic, formation flying. So people now, when they talk about satellites, right, they don't talk about flying 5 satellites. 5 satellites, it's really not attractive enough, right? So we need propulsion systems to keep all of our satellites in formation, tight formation, for new applications. Okay. Of course, we talk about in-situ control, and in-situ control really is for governments and large agencies interested in defense. Okay. And most importantly, like you all have mentioned earlier on, apart from just avoiding debris, we want to be responsible users of space. Every one of you out there who wants to deploy your systems up in space or platforms in space, I challenge you to really think of a solution to deorbit or to actually decommission or push your satellites at the end of lifetime to a suitable location so that you don't result in additional worry for the other platforms going up. All right, so, okay. So propulsion is essential, we've mentioned it earlier on. So why go electric? So let me just give you an analogy. Conventional propulsion systems, they are chemical or coal gas based. Now, all you need to know from this slide is the equation at the top right. But it's okay if you all don't understand calculus. Let me explain it in another way where you can feel the physics. I always like to tell my students, the equations are not important. You need to feel the physics because there's a lot of feeling in physics. If you don't feel it, right, you will never get the concepts. So propulsion, right, or thrust, or force for that matter, there's really 2 parameters only. Number 1, change in mass. Number 2, change in velocity. So let us all feel the physics right now. If we close our eyes and we imagine, right, we are on a roller chair. This roller chair, right, can move in any direction. I give you 2 objects. One is a fishball, the bak chor mee, that fishball. Okay, and I give you another object, which is a watermelon or a cannon. Okay, and I ask you on that roller chair to, intrinsically move backwards. Which object will you choose? Naturally, you will choose a cannonball or the watermelon. Why? Because you can feel, right, that if you take the watermelon and you throw it out, you get a little bit more push as compared to taking a fishball, right, then you throw. Maybe you throw a few hundred fishballs, you can't even move 1 centimeter, right? So you can feel this. Mass, the change in mass is important. Second thing, now you understand, right, that the mass is important. We use a very heavy object and we throw it out of the craft to generate the thrust. Now the second factor is velocity, or the speed. You've identified that you want to use a heavy object, the watermelon. You take the watermelon, there are 2 things you can do. Number 1, you can just throw it out like that. Or you can hold it and you can charge it up and you push it out at very, very high speeds. Now, which will you do to generate a large thrust? Since you're already throwing out a watermelon, right, you want to throw it out very fast, right, to get larger thrust. Naturally, you would think that you want a higher velocity to expel this in order for you to generate high thrust. So for our systems, electric propulsion, that's exactly what we do. We use heavy propellant to maximize the thrust that we generate. And number 2, the fact that we charge it up, we ionize the gas, we make it a plasma. Remember plasma? Charged gas? Once we charge up the gas, we are able to accelerate it out of the channel to generate very, very high exhaust velocities. And how high exhaust velocities are these? 50 kilometers per second. That's how fast our particles exit our chamber. So if you think about it, right, what's 50 kilometers per second? Just a rough gauge. It's akin to thinking from Changi Airport, you travel all the way to Tuas in 1 second. That's how fast our particles are exhausted, right? Okay, so this is essential talk about why we need electric propulsion systems and why it should be relevant. So there are really 3 key challenges. Number 1, for propulsion systems, we talk about, wow, it's fancy, but there are really 3 things. Why haven't we done it? Why can't we do it? We need to consider that for small platforms, it's not easy. Okay, the amount of panels that you have on board, and at very small footprints, it's very hard to miniaturize the systems. Number 2, the systems that are being deployed at this moment, they need a sort of lighter, right? It's like when you start up a fire, you need a lighter to ignite this, and this is really a key component which limits current propulsion systems. And finally, the lifetime of the systems in orbit is a huge problem. There are products on the market right now, but there are 2 key parameters for propulsion systems. Number 1, you want them to be functional. You don't want a product, right, that is very power efficient. Wow, it can work at 1 watt, but then what kind of trust you can get? Maybe not much. So it's really finding a balance between being functional and propellant plus power efficient. So at this moment, this is really the key challenge that propulsion players actually face. So as mentioned earlier on, there are 4 main areas, or rather key products at this moment that have been commercialized. But again, they are either very functional, that means they deliver very, very high trust. These kind of systems are like fire extinguishers. So in space, right, you can just squeeze a nozzle of fire extinguisher if you watch the movie Gravity. But you can't fire them for months and years for enhanced operational deployment. Or in other words, they can be very, very efficient, but they don't generate the trust that you need. I won't have time to go through my technology, the Hall thruster. I'll be at the exhibition next door, but I'll be happy to go into the physics behind the Hall thrusters. As I wrap up, let me just talk very quickly about Hall thrusters and the propulsion systems that I am commercializing at this moment. Now, these Hall thrusters, they are nothing new, right? They have been deployed by the Russians since the 70s. And in fact, they were so popular, right, that NASA took about 2 to 3 decades before they could develop their first Hall thruster. SpaceX, high-profile mission, every single one of their satellites carried a Hall thruster. But at this moment, they were not able to miniaturize it, operate it at very low powers, and there's one thing that SpaceX didn't release in the media, right? It's the fact that their propulsion systems require some time before they can fire up. Our systems are small, they're propellant efficient, and our systems can fire on demand. When you need it, you will have it. So I won't go into the challenges. I won't talk about the technical innovation. I do have a little bit of time just to talk about our system. This is our entire system, 1U. 1U is essentially 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters. In it contains a propellant tank. It contains our thrust head, a propellant management system, and a power processing unit. So all of this has been integrated into 1U. Now, what's the beauty of this 1U? It means that any commercial entity who wants to have a propulsion capability in their satellites, they can just buy one standardized unit for plug-and-play simplicity. And what we're doing is we're working very closely with a commercial entity now, actually quite a few commercial entities, to ensure that our demonstrator missions, number 1, not only shows that we are functional, number 2, not only shows that the companies that we work, their payloads are functional, but ultimately it shows that our systems are fully integrable on board a larger platform, and it shows this solidarity between all entities within Singapore trying to develop products that can be commercialized for a better good. I'm going to wrap up very quickly. I know I'm a bit lost. Okay, at this moment, we have completed our engineering model already. We're waiting to fire our systems with the kind support of Mr. Lim Wee Seng from the Satellite Research Center. Thank you very much. Okay, we've also begun pre-sales. Okay, so if you're interested in our propulsion systems, come approach me. We can give you a good price. Just kidding. No, I mean, really, the kidding part is not on the good price. Okay, and we have actually patented our systems already, so it's something that we're very proud to have. Okay, Before I go, I would like to acknowledge my team. Tony has been with me since the start. He's doing strategy with me. We have an ops guy who actually does all the heavy engineering work. We have a scientist, the brains behind this. I'm actually just not a very smart person. Of course, we have so our team, right, we like to call it 4-3-2-1. 4 advisors, 4 founders, 3 high-profile advisors, 2 engineers, we have 2 engineers, and we have 1 mission to make our systems work. So in summary, we believe that this is time for propulsion systems to catalyze the new market, the new space market, by enabling new missions up in space. We believe that our propulsion systems are technological enablers for the new economy, right? We are using Hall thrusters with modular designs. These are proven systems. But what we do is we modularize it and we make it operate and functional at low powers on demand when you need it. We have a technological demonstration scheduled next year, so please watch out for that in the news, right? We are a reputable team. I'm trying to upsell myself. We have strong collaborators, and we currently already have an order. So a constellation of about 400 has actually approached us, and we are selling our propulsion systems at this moment, just one customer, 400. We come from Singapore. We do this not so much because we want to make money, but also because we believe that we want to inspire new science engineers to take up the baton and actually come up with new systems that we can fly together collectively as an ecosystem within Singapore. And last but not least, we welcome partnerships, co-development, and collaboration. It's something that I would like to extend at the end of my talk to everyone or anyone who's interested in propulsion or space-related technologies. Do feel free to come and talk to me, because we want to see how we as a company can actually contribute back to this community in space. It's a very tight-knit community, but we want to see how we can drive this collectively and nurture this little bit for innovation and development, especially for space, because you guys are the future, okay? So thank you very much for your time. Please talk to me after that. I'm sorry I don't have a lot of time. Thank you.